ICIJ was started about 25 years ago, and originally it was designed as a network for journalists. The idea was that they would connect with each other if they needed work done in another country. What we do now is that we find what we think is a really great global story, and we go to media partners with that story, and in return for giving them the story idea and often data, they then in turn give us their reporters and their platforms to work with.
You have people like me who are reporters, and we do our own reporting, and we're often published in media and news outlets by other organisations who work with us. But we also wear that second hat, which involves collaboration. So I spend lots of my time identifying reporters who are interested in and who have the skills to collaborate with us on our next big project.
Sometimes it's a reporter or one of our team finds a story, or sometimes now, given that we're growing bigger and bigger, it's often a media partner. We now have about 150 media partners around the world that work regularly with ICIJ.
All global stories are local, and all local stories are global. And by having partners from all over the world, we see how the system works globally. And without all of those partners, we'd never be able to do that.
The biggest stories in ICIJ's history have been those that focus on the secret world of offshore finance. What's important to recognize is that this industry is secretive by design.
We did our first big global investigation into offshore in 2013 that led to other stories on offshore, which eventually actually triggered the Panama Papers itself.
The benefit in ICIJ having done repeated investigations on similar topics over the years has also been to show the evolution of things.
From Panama Papers to Paradise Papers, we saw how multinationals were really involved in this game of tax avoidance. And then with Pandora Papers, that was a great opportunity to look at the system globally, because the leak was not just from one company, but it was from 14 different offshore financial providers. We could actually prove how the whole system had issues and not just the one isolated company.
It's somewhat ironic that the more that ICIJ exposes this kind of behaviour, the more nimble that criminals and their enablers have to be to respond to that. And that's one of the reasons why we continue reporting on this topic.
We're very tech-driven. Almost half of our current team are either data journalists or technologists. And we're kind of filling a gap that has emerged in the media because the media is not investing in technology. We're also able to gather big data sets, either from whistleblowers or from publicly available data.
The important thing for us is really what we see, especially when you have documents. It's all about verifying that those documents are factually correct.
What we try to do, data team and tech team, is try to go through them, no matter how big and massive they are, and to try to clear them out for others to easily use.
Almost everything ICIJ does is online. We have built our own online newsroom. All the reporters go into that newsroom. They are able to talk to each other securely on that platform.
We've also built a sharing platform so that a reporter in one country can contact a reporter in another country securely and enable that collaboration that allows cross-border stories to be told.
We do know that data stories work best for our purposes because you've got to have unique information from each country to interest the reporter from that country in the particular story.
ICIJ works with reporters in nearly every country on the planet, and unfortunately in many of those countries, being an investigative journalist is an inherently dangerous job. Collaborating can be a tool in helping reporters to overcome repression, overcome censorship, and overcome those dangers.
What we've found is that reporters can find a story in their own country that they would not normally be allowed to report on. But by working as a collective, they're able to share that information with reporters from other countries who then report on that topic.
Stories come to ICIJ in a range of different manners. We are, of course, best known for some of our blockbuster leak-based investigations, but ICIJ is also more than that. We've also done other investigations based on public sources like implant files, which looked into the industry and the lack of regulation over medical devices like hip and breast implants.
We also requested through FOIA laws around the world hundreds of documents, and there were a lot of partners who were health reporters too, so they could share their expertise with others.
You don't know when something becomes important until it becomes important. The Uber files on Macron were actually from several years before he became the leader of the country, but they're now important because he is the leader of the country in France. And you can actually shed new light on things that people have forgotten about through this kind of journalism.
If you don't know what reality is like on the ground in another country, then you're not going to be able to identify the best stories and tell the story in a way that is likely to have most impact. So part of my job and part of the job of many of my colleagues in ICIJ is to train those reporters, helping them where we can, so that they can tell the most important local story for them.
One of the main things that needs to happen is raising the profile of the organization. Because when the stories are published, they're published by partners all around the world, but it's not necessarily ICIJ's name that comes through. They all attribute the journalism to ICIJ within the content, but it's not necessarily the first thing the reader may notice.
The real impact of ICIJ's investigations is not necessarily what you see on the front page the day after our investigation breaks, but really how our reporting feeds into an understanding over the longer term of what governments around the world need to do to make the world a fairer place.